Everybody, the simple handicap for Friday, November 1st. Thank you for making me a part of your morning, and welcome to the month of November. 2 more months of the NFL regular season to go as we're, depending on how you look at it, either right in the middle or right going into the halfway mark of the NFL season. Week number 9 kicks off yesterday on a good note with the New York Jets winning and covering. For those of you listening to the podcast, you would have heard me talk about it. It was not a Right Angle Sports release, but one was talking about here on the podcast yesterday morning. And by the way, over on the YouTube live stream preview, in the pinned comment, I'm now putting anything that comes out after the video airs that I have bet on or think is worthy of you looking at. I'm just putting little 1 or 2 sentence comments in the pinned comment below it. So I added the Jets one to that as well. So if you want to keep an eye on that this week and every week going forward as you get into Friday and Saturday, just something to go back and look at, which I'll update with some little 1 or 2 sentence blurbs on anything that changes during the week. Speaking of changes, want to update everybody that over on raspicks.com, as we get into the very busy portion of the calendar year, there is a new service that is launched called RAS Plus. It is $29 per month, will contain at least 60 plays over the next year. It's basically anything that isn't included in the main service that is worthy of a release is going out to all subscribers of that. And there's also a community aspect over at bettingtalk.com that is included within it. So if you are interested in looking at that as an option, would encourage everybody to head over to raspicks.com. New York Jets 21, Houston 13. Not a whole lot to recap. I think we saw the Houston Texans continue to struggle with all the injuries and issues that they are going through on both sides of the football. The New York Jets finally have some field goal luck go their way. They finally get the offense with their star players breaking out a little bit. It was a very slow start. Looked like it was going to be an ugly one, but they keep the season alive. Intriguing stretch coming up. Cardinals, Colts, Seahawks with a bye in between. You get both of these games going into the bye in winnable spots. Look out. There's a chance. I'm not getting too excited. I mean, 3-6, you're coming up from the bottom, but once you're starting to see some of these offensive players stand out and break out, I think it starts to look quite different than the perception that is put around the team. I'm trying to keep the optimism level low, but that was an example of what it looks like when things start to click a little bit. Now, what's important coming away from this is as we think towards week number 10, this mini bye is very important for both teams. As we saw, the Jets defense, it's banged up. The O-line going through some changes as well. I think it comes at a good time for the Jets. But let's talk about how good of a time it is for the Houston Texans. Mini bye to get all of these defensive starters that are down back to 100% potentially. You should have Nico Collins back next week. That was the target for him to return. If he does, as you start to look at some of these look-ahead numbers for week 10, that Sunday night football game with the Lions coming into Houston. If you think about the Lions possibly off a win at Green Bay this week with the Jordan Love scenario going on, and you're looking at the Lions that would likely off of a winning cover against Green Bay this week open 3 or possibly even 3.5. That all of the sudden, if Houston is getting guys back and healthy in that building on Sunday night football, starts to look like a very bettable spot. And let's keep an eye on what comes of the next 6 to 7 days for Houston Texans injuries, but there is a chance that it is a much different looking Texans team next week on Sunday Night Football. As for the Jets, as I mentioned, they're on the road in Arizona. That game was right around a pick'em. If Arizona wins and covers against Chicago, you probably see that game open up right around the same spot. Maybe you see Arizona -1 initially at the open, but that Houston game at Detroit could have some very valuable betting spots depending on how things play out. We'll leave it at that. Let's get to the final market rundown of this Friday morning and the final one of week number 9. New England Patriots on the road at the Tennessee Titans. This is Tennessee 3 -25 at Chris, 3 -20 at Circa and Buckeye. It's been the same price on both the side and the total for the last couple of days. Tajay Spears appears like he is in line to return. We also saw yesterday Ridley, a full participant in practice for the Tennessee Titans. That is a good sign as well. Will Levis is moving around in a limited capacity. Tyler Boyd and Tony Pollard both look like they're possibly going to miss this game, so that would be a blow to Tennessee, but something that's finalized a little bit later. I still like the Titans in this spot. as you're looking at the Pats with an injury report that is awfully lengthy on the defensive side, and it is still unclear on what we're going to get from Drake May if he is able to clear protocol. So I am surprised a little bit to see this price still lingering around, but this injury report today, if we do see all these names for the Pats defense not able to play, I'll be surprised personally if this does not get to 3.5. LA Chargers on the road at the Cleveland Browns. This is LA minus 1.5 with a total that is back down to 42. Bit surprising. Late week move has been on the under. Early week move was all over the over. It is good news for the LA Chargers, as we've talked about every day here on the podcast with Chark and Johnston, both back in practice and practicing fully. Same thing can be said for Will Dissly as well. This is the first time the Chargers have had their full complement of offensive weapons on the field really since week one. And even that you can't really say was true because Justin Herbert had the injury coming out of camp. And so this is a big week for the Chargers, a big week for the Chargers offense. I do think they look right. I just am a little bit surprised to see this come back the other way. When you think about Cleveland, no David Njoku. Also surprising to me that we don't see a little bit of movement in favor of the Chargers because the Browns still have all of these defensive injuries that you're looking at with now, in addition to JOK and Denzel Ward, looking at potentially Grant Delpit banged up as well, Shelby Harris inside. I mean, there's plenty of injuries all over the place for the Browns, and so I am surprised to see this total come back down a little bit. New Orleans on the road at the Carolina Panthers. For the Panthers, it's positive injury news. They should have the debut of their rookie running back. This is a very highly weighted return for Jonathan Brooks to start the season to make his debut. And the whole fantasy community this week is just raving about Jalen Coker. And they're raving about him due in part somewhat to his skill, but also because the Saints all of a sudden are just dealing with a rash of injuries at defensive back with Marshawn Lattimore and Kool-Aid McKinstry. That is cornerback number 1 and cornerback number 2 not participating in practice. Already Adebo is on IR. Same thing with Will Harris and Wright. So, I mean, the Saints' depth at defensive back is really, really tested. And so they're going to likely elevate practice squad guys. And Derek Carr has still yet to log the full practice. It is expected that he is going to be back. But as I'm looking at this point spread, I am surprised to see it still holding for the Saints. But what I am also surprised about is to see this total continuing to tick up. And I'm a little bit more surprised to see that this is held, hearing that one of the more respected bettors in the NFL space has played the under in this game. And I see 44s on the screen still this morning. I have a hard time believing those 44s are going to last. And so curious to see how low this goes. But I would certainly expect a little bit more under money with these 44s disappearing by the time you're probably looking at the odds screen a little bit later this morning. Miami on the road at the Buffalo Bills. This is another game that saw a little bit of under money come in the last 24 hours as we see 48.5s now on the board, and I don't agree with this. We have the release on the over from earlier in the week, but for Miami on defense, Javon Holland looks like he could potentially miss. We'll get his final status later. Kohu's still a DNP, would expect him to be out. You're looking at Zach Seiler, likely to miss as well. You take those guys out of this Dolphins defense. It was a problem last week. I think that carries over to this week against the Bills. I'm surprised to see under money come into this market in the last 24 hours. I'm having a hard time with understanding why or who is looking at that to justify that move. Dallas on the road at the Atlanta Falcons. Deron Bland will be back for the Cowboys in the defensive backfield, but no Parsons expected for this game. And there's still an interesting move, as there was initially on Wednesday evening, there was a push for the Dallas Cowboys, as we talked about yesterday morning. The 3s turned into 2.5s, and now we see Atlanta later in the week. Limits get bumped out to 3 minus 20. There's disagreement. There's back and forth on this, but the bigger move and the more influential move so far has been on the Falcons, pushing this up with which we saw yesterday. Wonder if there's going to be a difference coming back the other way with the Cowboys after that move on Wednesday night. We'll see if there's a follow-up to that maybe brings this back a little bit. But this is a game that really I haven't had a strong take on the entire week. Still don't have one now. Denver on the road at the Baltimore Ravens. You want to talk about not having a take. Here we go. Lamar Jackson originally on Wednesday talked about having an illness, was a non-participant in practice. Not unusual. Yesterday, all of a sudden, the illness turned into a knee and back injury. DNP for day number 2. in a row. In addition to that, Baltimore already with a couple defensive injuries, but will have both of their defensive backs. But what do you make of the Lamar scenario? I don't know what to make of it. Todd Monken was not saying anything. Harbaugh was avoiding the questions. They were saying it is what it is. What is it? I don't know. I'm surprised to see that designation yesterday. The board went blank. All of the 9.5s are gone. We're now down to Ravens an 8-point favorite. Now this total, as we talked about yesterday, got bet up on Wednesday. We see it now as high as 46.5. Has not been a move back on the total yet. Lamar Jackson would be massive if he misses this game. We are getting well below 7 if that is the case, and the total is most certainly going to come down as well with Josh Johnson in line to start if he isn't able to go. But I don't know what to make of this status. I don't know what to make of the spot. Surprised to see that. All of that to say, if you do get Lamar in this game and you're seeing an 8 again, knowing who has already bet Baltimore -8 earlier in the week, that's a side I would definitely want to be on. But obviously, Lamar Jackson is going to drive that decision. And if you're looking for updates later on, again, as I mentioned underneath that YouTube video, the Week 9 preview live stream, I'll update that pinned comment if you want to keep an eye on that one as we get closer to kickoff on Sunday. Las Vegas on the road at Cincinnati. No T. Higgins for day number 2 for Cincinnati. Still 7 across the board, still 46 in this game. Indianapolis on the road at the Minnesota Vikings for Minnesota. Not much has changed for Indianapolis. Same thing holds true. We're still looking at the Colts -5.5. We're still looking at a total here at 46.5, leaning towards the over. Washington on the road at the New York Giants. Commanders showing 4.5, a new market high for the week at Circa this morning. Late week move, and the money all on the Washington Commanders. We see this total still holding at 44. And I tell you what, if you're watching the Commanders injury report later today and you don't see Frankie Louvu back at practice, and you see Farrell not practicing as well, both of those guys miss, the Giants are going to move the football in this game. I have no doubt that this game sets up to be an over, and it's certainly something we talked about on the Wednesday live stream preview, something we talked about on the podcast a lot. But if you take Louvu, who's been having an awesome season for Washington, out, that's going to, I think, deservingly should have an impact on the total. Whether or not it's realized on the key of 44, we'll see. When it comes to the Giants, I think you take him out of there and you're going to see offensive success. Defense for New York, clean in terms of the injury report. Offense, only Tyrone Tracy as he's going through the concussion protocol. I don't think that's going to have a major impact on this number, but I am watching those Washington defensive injuries. Chicago on the road at the Arizona Cardinals. Arizona a 1-point favorite. And this number is going to go up if the Bears are going to be without 2 offensive linemen, both Jones and Jenkins, the left side of the offensive line, double DNPs this week, as is the case for Jaquan Brisker and Kyler Gordon, at defensive back. So you have 2 key starters on the defensive backfield and 2 key starters on the offensive line for Chicago. Both groups of injuries, all 4 of them look like they're going to be in it tough to play in this game after double DNPs to start the week. Those defensive backs have been DNPs for the last week before this as well. You get those 4 ruled out, we're going to see Arizona take a little bit of money in this spot. Total holding steady at 44.5. I could see Arizona getting to 2 off of that news. The big surprising news of the day next to Lamar Jackson took place here. LA Rams on the road at Seattle. We're seeing Seattle back to a pick'em at Buckeye. We're seeing a few other books down to a flat -1 after getting as high as -2.5. But the news yesterday is that Puka Nacua potentially re-injured the same knee to the injury that kept him out for multiple weeks. There was an initial report that he tweaked it at practice, and it was sounding a lot more concerning than it was around 3 to 4 p.m. Pacific time. And then we saw that kind of get walked back a little bit, where it was considered not to be serious. You think back to multiple weeks this year, T. Higgins last week, other wide receivers who have had a lower body tweak in practice during the week. Pretty good indication that that could be a limiting factor or keep him out of the game on Sunday. We've seen a few wide receivers so far this season suffer those week of practice injuries, not be able to play. Hard to know what we're going to get from Nacua in such a big game. But when you think about the Rams rushing him back last week and not having him go through a full practice, before coming back to the field, albeit doing it earlier than expected as well. Looks like they might be paying the price a little bit for that one, unfortunately. This total has come in off of the news as well. Pinnacle and FanDuel down to 47.5. Other books at 48, trending under. So that is a big name to watch. On the other side, DK Metcalf did not practice yet again, but there was another comment after from Mike McDonald who said that he is still optimistic that he is going to be on the field. The offensive line for Seattle, both Fant and Lucas, again, limited in practice. Curious if either one of them gets a full today. That would be massive if they were able to add those guys to the O-line in time for this game. Detroit on the road at the Green Bay Packers. Green Bay money continues to come in as Jordan Love was back at practice in a limited fashion. Starts to remind me of the earlier season games, but this one obviously with a much higher importance to the Green Bay Packers. We're starting to see 2.5 showing. Circa was the first book to go to 2.5. That's where we're at this morning. We're seeing FanDuel and DK as well at 2.5. Chris, 3 even money. Same thing with Buckeye. Same thing with Bet Online. If this gets to 2, Green Bay or Detroit's going to get bet. If Green Bay gets down and they get bet down and there's Love news today and it gets to around 2, I would fully expect Detroit to be bet at that number and this to start to go back the other way. It may take Love being ruled in over the weekend or being labeled as active on Saturday, perhaps, if it doesn't come later today. But as soon as this gets a little bit lower, I would expect after some of that news, Detroit to take a little bit of money based on what I have been hearing around some betting circles. Jacksonville on the road at the Philadelphia Eagles. Philly still a 7.5-point favorite. Total still 46. Jacksonville cluster injury at wide receiver. Looks like it's going to be much less serious than what we thought it would be last Sunday. Curious to keep an eye on Ezra Cleveland and Brandon Sheriff on the offensive line in terms of injuries for this game. Darius Slay and Dallas Goedert for Philadelphia, not likely to go in this game. And then Monday Night Football, it's Tampa Bay on the road at the Kansas City Chiefs. 8.5, the number for KC across the board with a total of 45.5. As I mentioned at the top, if you want to keep an eye on that YouTube pinned comment underneath the video, would encourage everybody to go over there sometime either later today in the evening or on Saturday. Just keep an eye on it if you're curious if anything is going to be added to the bets that we have already talked about here on the podcast and on that live stream video in addition to the releases. Hope everybody has a fantastic Friday. Hope everybody has a fantastic weekend, and I'll talk with each and every one of you Sunday afternoon right around 4:25 p.m. Pacific after the late games wrap up.